Well, good morning. It's that time of year, right? That time of year where everybody seems focused on one day, one place, one thing. I mean, we're preparing for it now. We're going out and we're buying stuff for it. We're planning family get-togethers. Our kids are making lists. And we're checking them off and marking things out that are way too expensive. But why are we all focused on that day? You know, it seems like our whole world is focused on that one day. Why is that? See, I think it's all about the story. I think it's all about the story that's being told. That story that probably most of us know. You know, I would even guess that maybe as much as 98% of us in this room know most of the story. But I bet there's some of us in this room that don't know all of the story. And maybe you're here today and maybe you're only here because somebody promised to buy you lunch afterwards. Maybe you don't buy into this whole church thing, this whole God thing. Maybe the only thing you like about Christmas, the only thing you get about it is, hey, I get some cool presents. And that's okay. We're glad you're here. See, we're going to be retelling this story. We're going to take the next few weeks and we're going to retell the story from the beginning to the end. And hopefully you're going to hear something that's going to help you in your life. Hopefully you're going to hear something that's going to be mind-changing for you, that's going to be life-changing for you. And so as we think about this story, this greatest story ever told, I mean, to tell a story that spans the entire Bible, we're going to have to look at a lot of verses. And there is no way that I'm going to read that many and I'm going to put that many on the screen. And so at the end today, we're going to give you a keyword that you can text in. And you can get a link to a PDF that's going to have all the verses that I'm going to reference today. Some of them I'm not even going to tell you that I'm referencing them, but if you look through that, you'll see them. You'll find them. Because we want to retell this story. This story that most of us know, or at least think we know. But how do we do that? How do we tell such a huge, awesome story? How can we do that? Well, see, I think we can use something that we're familiar with. Because we probably all have gotten some of these or will get some of these Christmas cards. And I think Christmas cards are interesting because they all have a story. Maybe it's just a family photo in there. Maybe there's a letter that you get. Maybe it's just a picture on the front. Maybe it's just some words. Whatever it is, that card has a story. That card is there to help us understand something. And so we're going to take some cards and we're going to look at the story. This story that goes all the way back. This story that we think we all know. And so we're going to look at this first card that I have here. And maybe you're looking at that and you think to yourself, what does a person holding some fruit have to do with this story? It has everything to do with this story. This is where the story begins. You see, our story begins at the point before anything was created. At the point where God was there and said, you know what, I want to make some things. I want to create some beings that are going to worship me, that are going to be with me, they're going to have a relationship with me because they want to. because they had free choice. And so God began the process of creating the universe and the stars and the planets. And then he created the earth, and he created the water and the land and the trees and the plants and the animals. And then he created human beings. He created this guy named Adam and this girl named Eve. And he put them in a garden. And they had a great relationship. And he said, you can eat anything in the garden but that one type of fruit. That one tree you can't eat from. Well, many of us in this room know that they ate from the tree. Eve went and took a piece of fruit and ate it, and then she took it to Adam and gave it to Adam, and Adam ate it. And then later that day, God came and said, hey, what's going on? There's a problem. Adam, why did you eat the fruit? And he said, hey, it wasn't me. It wasn't me. I didn't eat the fruit. It wasn't my fault. It was that woman that you made and gave me. It was her fault. And Eve said, whoa. It was not my fault. It was that serpent's fault that came and tempted me and lied to me. You see, Satan had come and taken the form of a serpent and had tempted and led Eve astray to eat the fruit. And God said, okay, but you got to leave the garden. And I'm going to cause there to be hostility between the offspring of this woman and you, Satan. In fact, there's going to be one offspring that's going to come and he's going to crush your head. See, that was the beginning of it all. This was the beginning of our story. That was the point that we as human beings could no longer have a relationship with the creator of the universe because we had messed up. We had messed up. And you see those two, Adam and Eve, they went out of the garden and they began to multiply. They had a family, and their kids had families, and their families had families, and so forth and so on, until there were lots and lots of people on earth. And those people began to stray from God. Those people began to go away from God. And God said, I can't have this. This isn't how I want this to go. And so I'm going to wipe out everything I created. I'm going to wipe them out. I'm going to take them off the face of the planet. But then he found one guy. He found one guy. His name was Noah. He found this one guy that was still trying to follow him in the midst of all this evilness, in the midst of all this wickedness. And he said, okay, Noah, you need to build a boat, a huge boat, because I'm going to save you, and I'm going to save your kids, and I'm going to save your kids' wives. And I'm going to send animals to you, Noah, so that you can save the creatures that I've created. And then I'm going to wipe out the earth with a flood. And that's what happened. God wiped it out. You see, we sometimes think, hey, you know what? All of us came from Adam and Eve, but more specifically, all of us came from this guy named Noah and his wife. Because it all started over right there. The story restarts. You see, all of those people that got off that ark, they went and they had families, and their families had families, and their families had families, and again, the earth is populated, and there's this one guy again. And his name is Abraham. And God tells Abraham, he says, Abraham, I want to change the world with your family. I want you to bless every person on earth. That's what I want you to do, Abraham. So Abraham had a single son. His name was Isaac. A single son with his wife Sarah. His name was Isaac. And Isaac had a son whose name was Jacob. And Jacob had 12 sons. And they became the 12 tribes of Israel. Not those 12 kids, but those 12 kids' families became the nation of Israel. And there was this one son. His name was Judah. And his family founded this city. This city that, what we see on cards a lot. City that looks like this. That's our classic, iconic, ancient Middle Eastern city. But this city becomes the focal point, the center of everything that happens in the Bible. This city becomes immensely important. And that's where Judah's family was years and years and years after Judah died. And there was a guy that lived in that city, again, one guy. His name was Jesse. And Jesse had a bunch of kids, but he had one kid that most of us might recognize his name. His name is David. And if you don't recognize just David, you might recognize this phrase, David and Goliath. That David. That David lived in this town, lived in this city. And that David took out the giant that day. And that's why we remember him. But we remember him for something else as well. Because David became king of Israel. He became the king, the second king, the greatest king, King David. And David was a great king. And after David was gone, his son became king. And then things started going south. And just a couple of generations after David, the nation of Israel split. This was still the epicenter. This was still the focal point. This little town. Even though it was split. But not long after it split, they were taken over. These other countries came in, these other kingdoms, these other empires came in and took the people of Israel captive. And took them away and made them be slaves and took them away from their homeland, took them away from the city. And they are there. They are in bondage. They are in captivity. They are stuck. And they begin to cry out to God, God, please save us. God, please rescue us from captivity. Please rescue us from slavery. God, please bring us back to Israel and give us a new king. And so God says, okay, I will send you a new king. I will send you a new king. And then I guess the thought was, how will they know when the king arrives? Because right now they don't have a mechanism to put a king in place. They don't have a monarchy that's ruling and, hey, it's just going to be the next son that's born that's going to be king. How are they going to know? And so they had these guys called prophets. And these prophets, guys like Isaiah. And Isaiah wrote this book. And on this card, it has a verse. It says Isaiah 40, verse 3. And it basically says, hey, guess what? The king, the new king is coming, and you will know who he is because of some things that happen before he shows up. And in this verse, it says there's going to be somebody that comes ahead of him that begins to say, hey, the new king is coming. Hey, the king is coming. Get prepared for him. Get ready. The king is coming. There's going to be a messenger. See, that's what Isaiah was doing. Isaiah was saying, hey, this is how you're going to know when the new king is here. But Isaiah wasn't the only prophet. There were a lot of prophets. And they said a lot of things about this new king. In fact, they gave us 353 at least things to be able to point out and know who the new king was. That they told us, hey, he's coming. He's going to be born in that city. That city that's the focal point, that city that is important, that city that is the epicenter of everything. He's going to be born in that city. They said, hey, he's going to be born of a young woman. He's going to be born of a virgin. They said, hey, this is what are some things that he's going to say. Hey, here's some things that he's going to do. Here's some things that he's going to look like. Here's some things that are going to happen to him. This is what's going to happen. And the reason that God told us all of these things is so that we can point and go, oh, that's the king. That's the new king. Because there's no way that it could just be a coincidence that somebody fulfilled 353 prophecies. But what does that have to do with us? See, we have the hindsight to go back and look at these prophecies and go, okay, I see how that works. I get that. I understand that. We have that ability, but they didn't at that time. You know, in fact, they didn't even have the ability, most of them, to read these prophecies. They didn't have the ability to read this story. It wasn't until about just 400 years ago that most people in the English-speaking world could read this thing called the Bible, because it wasn't in a language that we could understand. There's still places in the world today where they can't read the whole Bible because it's not in the language that they speak and read. And so people began to just tell the story. They just told the story. They just said, hey, this is what's happening. Hey, this is what happened. Hey, this is what's to come. They just told the story. But why? Why did they tell the story? See, I think they told the story because it gave them hope. They were in captivity. They were slaves. And God said, I'm going to send a new king. I'm going to send a new king. Now, most of us are not in captivity. Most of us have never been and will never be slaves. Most of us will never experience another country coming in and conquering us. Most of us will not experience any of that, but I suspect that all of us will be conquered by something in our lifetime. All of us will have something that holds us captive. And I think we can learn from these folks that were anticipating this new king. You see, I don't know what it is that holds you captive. But I have a general idea of how it came about. Because most of the time, the things that hold us captive are the bad choices that we make. They're the bad choices that other people make. They're the things that are beyond our control. They are wrong ideas that we uphold. They are wrong philosophies that we live by. And those things hold us captive. Those things put us into slavery. And it puts us in the same place, in the same position that the Israelites were in. It puts us into that place where we are in bondage. And we need to begin to call out and say, God, we need that king. We need that one that you're going to send, that one that's going to rescue us, that's going to take us out of slavery. God, how can we do that? And that's where these people were. They were sitting in slavery and crying out to God. Crying out to God. And so God continued to tell them things and continued to prepare them. And when I think about how we can learn from them, I think about one verse. I think about one verse when it comes to this new king. I'm going to put this verse up on the screen for you because I want you to get it. I want you to see it. It's in the book of Isaiah, chapter 9, verse 6. And it says this. It says, "For a child is born to us, a son is given to us. The government will rest on his shoulders, and he will be called a mighty God." A mighty God. See, this is what they thought of when they thought about a mighty God. This is what they thought about. Someone that could come in and that could conquer. Someone that could come in and vanquish their enemies. Someone that could come in and wipe out the nations that had taken them captive. That's what a mighty God was. See, they saw people like the Babylonians and the Romans and the Greeks and the Chaldeans and any of those other empires that were in that area of the world that would come in and conquer them and take them over. They saw them and they said, we need a mighty God that can come in and that can wipe out those people and get us out of this position in this place. You see, in that day and time, in that world, to be mighty meant that you were a warrior. To be mighty meant that you could handle yourself in battle. To be a mighty God or a mighty king meant that you were a great general, that you could lead your troops into battle and they would win. And so God said, hey, guess what? I am sending this new king. And he is going to be a wonderful counselor. And he is going to be a mighty God. And man, they got excited about that. See, they got excited about the prospect that God was going to come in and he was going to be this mighty God, this warrior God, and he was going to take out their enemies and he was going to give them freedom from the things that were holding them captive. They were excited about that. But if you know this verse, you know that I didn't read it all. Because he said more than just wonderful counselor and mighty God. See, the verse continues. See, it says, for a child is born to us. A son is given to us. The government will rest on his shoulders, and he will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, and Everlasting Father. Everlasting Father. What does that mean, to be an everlasting father? What does that mean? See, some of us look at that and go, man, I don't know if I want an everlasting father. My father was a total jerk. My father still is a total jerk. Some of us did not have great relationships or do not have great relationships with our dad, with our father. And so it's hard for us to relate to that. Some of us in this room had great dads, have great dads, had great relationships with them, still do have great relationships with them. And we would be excited about having a dad that was always there. And so God says, I'm going to send this new king, and he is going to be an everlasting father. What does that mean? Some of us know what it means, some of us don't. See, a father is someone that's there all the time for you. A father is there when you make a stupid mistake, and they're there to pick you up. They're there to love you no matter what. That's what a father is. That's what an everlasting father is going to be. He's going to be there all the time. Now, you might be sitting here today going, man, James, I don't see this everlasting father bit. I mean, because if a father's there to protect me and love me and be there for me, if that's what a father is, then why are these things that are difficult and hard happening in my life? Clearly, God is not acting like a father to me. But I want you to think for a minute. I want you to think about your father. Or if you're a father, I want you to think about your kids. I want you to think about what happens with your kids. See, you try and lead them down the right path. You try and point them in the right direction. You try and give them that advice. But at some point, as heartbreaking as it is, you have to let your kids fail. You have to let them fail. You have to let them fall because sometimes they're not going to learn it without it. See, God's sitting there saying, I want you to learn this. I want to be there for you. But you're going to make some bad choices, or some other people are going to make some bad choices, and some bad things are going to happen, and some hard things are going to happen, and some things are going to happen that are completely out of your control. But guess what? I'm the everlasting Father, and I will be there in the moment when it gets hard. I will be there in the moment for you to cry on my shoulder. I will be there in the moment for you to tell me how you feel and what's going on. I will be there because I am the everlasting Father. So God said, I'm going to send this new king. He's going to be a wonderful counselor. He's going to be a mighty God. He's going to be the everlasting Father. But there's one more thing. There's one more thing. See, he says, a child is born to us. A son is given to us. The government will rest on his shoulders, and he will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, and Prince of Peace. I think this one threw him for a loop. I don't think they knew what to do with this. They were looking for a king to come in and get them out of slavery and get them out of bondage. And God says, I'm going to send a peaceful king. How does that work? How do I get out of bondage and slavery with a guy that's all about peace? That doesn't make sense, God. Why would you do that? Why would God send the Prince of Peace? Why would he do that? Why would he do that? See, they were looking for a general. They were looking for a conqueror. They were looking for someone to come in and take out their enemies. And when we look around and we look at our life and we look at the things that are holding us captive, we look at the things that are keeping us in bondage. And God says, hey, don't worry about those things, because I'm sending the Prince of Peace. And we go, what is peace going to do to get me out of this place that I'm at? What is that going to do? How am I going to deal with that with peace? Well, let's just think about our world right now for a moment. I think our world today is whatever the opposite of peace is. You know, when I go on Facebook, when I go on Instagram, that once a month when I open Twitter, I see the opposite of peace. I see hate. I see strife. I see disunity throughout our world. It doesn't matter if we're Christ followers or not. I don't see peace. When I talk to people and I say, hey, how's it going? And it's busy, running all the time. That doesn't sound very peaceful to me. That sounds very hard, very difficult, and very challenging. And God says, I want to be the Prince of Peace in your life. I'm going to come in. I'm going to send this new king. So he's talking to these people in Israel. He's talking to these people that are in captivity. He's talking to these people that are slaves and saying, I'm going to send you a new king. The greatest king ever. And he's going to come in and he is going to be all of these things. He's going to be that wonderful counselor, that mighty God, that everlasting Father. He's going to be that Prince of Peace. But the question has to be, what are you going to do with this wonderful counselor? With this mighty God, with this everlasting Father, with this Prince of Peace? What are you going to do with him in 2017? in 2018? What are you going to do with him? You see, because we have the choice of what we're going to do. We have the choice of whether or not we're going to listen to the counsel, whether or not we're going to let him be mighty in our life. We've got to make the choice of what we're going to do. What we're going to do with him. Because all of us need the Prince of Peace. See, when we think about this story, when we look at this story and we look and we say, man, it started at the beginning with a bad choice to disobey God. And it grew and it became this thing where there's this epicenter of this one city that became the epicenter of everything. And man, we know that there's going to be some great things, and this great king came from there, but there's going to be a new king. And there's all these prophecies, there's all these things that are telling us about this new king. And one thing that we know is that he's going to be a mighty God, that he's going to be an everlasting Father, that he is going to be the Prince of Peace. We then have to decide what we're going to do. What are we going to do? See, it's this time of year. It's this time of year when we're all focused on this one day. This one day that is part of this story. Your coworkers are focused on it. Your neighbors, your family, your friends. We're focused on this day. Who needs to hear this story? Who of those people in your life need to hear this story? Maybe you need to hear this story. And so I have gone through a couple thousand years of history in just a few minutes. So we're going to give you that link, that ability to go back and read through this story. And so if you want to get your phone out, get ready to text, we're going to get you to text this keyword, Retold OT. Retold OT to 555-888. That's got to be all one word. It'll send you a link to a PDF, and you can see all the references that I've talked about today. Because you see, there's people around you. There's people around you that need to hear this story. There's going to be people at the family gatherings that you go to over this season that need to hear this story. There's going to be people in your neighborhood, the people at your job, people that you just hang out with that need to hear this story. And so we encourage you to retell the story, because that's how people will know. That's how people will know that we took this story that went from a place that was utter devastation, that they were kicked out of the garden, a place of turmoil and sadness and hurt, to a place that now we get together and celebrate and put up decorations and sing songs and exchange gifts, and it's a happy time of year. That is a major change in the story. That is a major shift in the plot line. And we need to figure out what we're going to do about it. How are we going to use this story to change our life and show other people that God wants to change their lives as well? God, we thank you. God, we thank you for this time of year where we can be focused, where we can be focused on what you're doing in the world around us. God, that we can be focused on this story, the greatest story ever told. God, this story that had so much build up, so much lead up. God, help us to understand that. Help us to put that into play in our life. God, as we think about this new king, this wonderful counselor, this mighty God, this everlasting Father, this Prince of Peace, God, help us to do something. Help us to put this new king in charge of our life, the way that these captives, these Israelites that were in slavery, they were ready to put this new king in charge of everything. Help us to do that in our life. It's in Jesus' name I pray. Amen.